This server is officially Docker, everywhere Docker. The server is officially done and we have named it Saga, which I hope I am pronouncing in Saga? I hope Saga doesn't sound weird. But we have finally finished the server. Now, in between last time, and I will just open up my notes here because I took a lot of notes. In between last time and today or now, because it's essentially just a whole bunch of hours in between. Now, I have done a whole lot of fine-tuning, settings changing, and benchmark testing, temperature testing, that kind of stuff to have the server ready to be moved into the other room where it will then reside for the next years, hopefully. Now, I have played around a lot with this thing, and a few things, not one like hardware issue or any sort of issue that would make it like reboot or shut it down or any like red flag, nothing of any sort. The thing is though, I have played around a lot with the fan curves of every fan here. Now in that Asus IPMI system, we have a whole lot of temperature sensors and we can see and configure exactly how we want the fans to ramp up and ramp down. And the fan situation for the use case that we have is so much over the top that no matter what I do to the fan curves, it won't change anything. Like for example, all of these values here, those temperature sensors located somewhere on the motherboard, I have never seen any one of those spike above 60. They just don't. The same thing for the CPU. The CPU has not reached 50 degrees C on the die yet whatsoever. Not at all. And the same thing for TrueNAS. I can see the sensors of every hard drive, if I see this report, and you've already seen here, the max, the highest recorded temperature was 57 degrees C, and I have not seen it move by 1 degree the whole day. 57 was the max that I managed to pull off once I turned all the fans down, and it didn't spike even close to that since. Now I have played really a lot around with the fan settings, especially for those 6,000 RPM fans. And the thing is, all of these drives are running in between, let's say 49, 48, or here we have 47, and like 57 degrees. And A, it never went above 57, that's one thing. But B, no matter what I do to those 6,000 RPM fans, that temperature is not going really down or up. Like at all. So what I did do in the end is set fan curves that are so, how should I say, so nice to my ear without making me fear for my temperatures in here. Like if I show you my fan curves, look at that. Zone 3, 4, 5 and 6 are for the 3 fans in the front. It starts at 10%, and I had to manually change that setting where it will throw like a sensor error because the fan, like the PWM tacho signal wouldn't be recognized properly and it would show up as an error. But I turned them down as much as I could because it did not change anything. And the thing is that I am copying over for a few hours now, because first I had to copy over a whole different data set, and now I'm copying like the main STS one, which is 41.1 terabytes left. I think it was like 46 something at the beginning. So this has been copying for quite some time, and it will continue to do so for a day. And the temperatures didn't change any bit, nothing. And I will continue, let this now settle, see tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, if it spiked at all in the meantime. I guess it won't, because truth is, I'm sitting here in this room the whole day, the lights are shining all the time, the temperature in the room is going up and up and up, and nothing is happening. The temperatures don't budge a bit, and the room temperature has risen by like at least 3 or 4 degrees, so no, this works perfectly fine. Now, the only other thing I have done in the meantime is install an application here under wrong FreeNAS. Here a app. I installed Plex. That's basically everything, because the server will be used for 2 things, data storage and Plex. For now, maybe VMs at some point. However, as I announced at the very beginning of this way too long series, I wanted to make a summary video about how everything went, what I learned, what I wouldn't do again, and what I would do again. And I have a whole spreadsheet here of things that I've learned while building my very first server in with server grade hardware. Lesson number 1, don't do everything at once. I learned that the hard way. A PC or a regular PC is plannable to like the last little component. This isn't. Maybe if you have done multiple ones, probably how PCs work, but if you're doing this for the very first time, it won't be planned. You will do mistakes, essentially. Stuff will happen, you will decide for something that later on you realize wasn't the best, let's say, path to go, which also happened for me. Best example are these cards, which are useless because they don't do what I thought they would be doing. And I'm saying don't plan everything at once, because you should plan as much as you can, but stay in a state where you are very responsive to potential change, because it will come up. Exhibit A. Or for example, the cables that I bought. I bought the two 50-centimeter cables to connect the front blades, or those blades here for the hard drives, to originally these cards, and with the new card the cable wasn't long enough. So I planned something to a degree where I wasn't capable of changing one decision without affecting another decision that I took at an earlier stage. So I should have taken the longer cables to make sure that no matter if this works or not, that I always have long enough cables. I didn't do it, I planned too much, and hence I had to buy stuff multiple times. But this boils down to don't buy everything at once. If you know what hard drives will go in, sure, but the motherboard you know too, RAM and all of that stuff. But as soon as you get into weird things, don't buy everything at once. You will need to buy it multiple times, and especially because everything, once you go into the server realm, is hella expensive. Just as an example, the SATA RAID card that I bought, the Asus Pike 2 3008, that one giving me theoretically a theoretical 8 SATA connections, that one costs more than some motherboards that have more than 8 SATA connections. And we are just talking about a RAID card. And no matter what B chipset motherboard you would buy, you would have more with potential RAID support. So it's just expensive. If you want to get the smallest feature, it's expensive as hell. Keep that in mind. Oh yeah. Another very important point, but that's not what I would have done differently, but I learned that the hard way. Research for this kind of stuff is very complicated. There isn't that much resource about it. You will find forums and all that kind of stuff, yes, but it's way less than if you look for the average ATX motherboard, for the average Intel i something CPU. The thing is, not only is it more complicated to find something, you don't really know what you are looking for. Again, Exhibit A. I thought I am looking for this. I found this, in an army of these. And I bought 2 of them, but I didn't actually know what I was looking for. And when this here threw an error, I didn't even know what error or what problem I'm trying to research. So you get into these holes of you don't even know what your problem is, so how will you find a solution? And some people in the comments of the last few videos pointed that out. One even said that he can't read the serial number or whatever on the card to see if I bought the right thing. And the comment came too late at that point. However, at that point I was in a hole where I didn't even know what my problem was. So how the hell would I find a solution? If I can't define the problem, how will I look for a solution? And you will find yourself quite often in these kinds of issues. Once you know what you did wrong, you will look at it completely differently. You will know for the future. And I hope my mistake helps somebody out there to not make the same mistake. But yeah, be prepared to look for a solution where you don't really know what you're looking for. Now coming to some of the components. Starting off with the case, this SilverStone RM43. I am happy with it, more than happy. It's really okay to work in it. If I knew what I know now, I would have purchased some gloves. You will need to press your fingers, press half your hand into very tight spaces. For example, once you try to route those SFF cables, those U2 SFF cables from the front to the back, you have those rounded holes in the bottom of the case, and everything is sharp there, and you have very little space. And get a pair of gloves. It will help a ton. But the biggest problem with this case is all of that Molex. Now, I did the mistake that I used that SilverStone Hela power supply. However, already like a week ago, somebody asked on the Discord server how he could use the same case, because apparently he has it, with a power supply without relying on an army of splitters as I did. And truth be told, just get a bit different power supply. Like you have even SilverStone power supplies where you got enough like peripheral connections on the power supply to have 10 Molex cables later on. You have that. These power supply exist. I just don't have one. And even in the case of that one comment on Discord, he has like a Corsair or something 1200 watts power supply, and that one already came with like 8 Molex connectors by default, and he just had to purchase one additional cable, still leaving him with more than enough peripheral cable. So he was able to get, I think, like 12 Molex connections out of his power supply without splitters. So there are solutions around that. I just didn't have a good one. But if I would have another try at this, I would get a vastly different power supply, one with more than enough Molex connectors. Not what I did here. Don't go with splitters. The last thing about the case, and I already said it, the fans in here are so OP for my use case. No matter what I do to the fan curve, it doesn't change a thing. Nothing. Maybe in a week or so, if the server is standing for a bit and I do more like hardware intensive stuff on it, maybe yeah, I will see a difference. But for now, no, just nothing. Those fans are now spinning at like 1500, 1300 RPM all the time, and the hard drives seem to be very cool, so I'm fine. And this will bring me to the one thing I would definitely recommend you do if you have the server running in the room that you are working in. Relocate or reinstall the fans with the PWM plug connected to your motherboard and control them via software or via IPMI or whatever. But don't let those front plates control them. They will spin up so hard, and they have like a minimum fan curve. The fan curve like starts at 50%. It's incredibly loud from the get-go, and they won't get any quieter. So relocate the connection. Try to control it completely via software. You don't want them to be controlled using the temperature sensors in the front of the case. I mean, if you have a separate server room and this is installed inside of a server rack and you can't hear it anyway, then sure, let them blast all day. But for me, it will be sitting like, let's say 5-6 meters behind me. No, I won't deal with that. I prefer to control them and from time to time keep an eye on the temperature, because I'm sure it will be fine, but my noise level won't be fine. So I would absolutely redo that. For the CPU, I mean, I'm basically doing right now on the CPU the maximum that it will do. And the average usage is 0%. And I have seen that number spike to 2 in the last few hours. And you can see the highest usage, like across all threads, is 8. It is completely OP. The AMD EPYC, what is it, 7763, is so over the top. I don't need that. This is meant, I could run so many VMs on this and not care. So yeah, if I would do this again, I would probably take a way less expensive, way less powerful CPU, because frankly, I don't need it. For the Arctic Freezer for you, it's perfectly fine. The CPU, the hottest I have ever seen it is 50 degrees, but it doesn't go above that. And that is with a room that is beginning to get hotter and hotter and hotter, so seems perfectly fine for me. No issue whatsoever. The biggest mistake of all of this endeavor here, I believe, is the motherboard. I chose that Asus KRPA U16, and it does work fine. The fan controlling software is fine. But if I could do all of this over again, I would choose a different motherboard for the sole purpose of getting more of those UDA2 connections. I needed to go through so much trouble, buy one of these, 2 of these, buy another RAID card, buy here, buy there, to somehow get all of these blades connected. And I would have saved myself so much headache if I had just done more research on the motherboard part, or done a harder job finding an appropriate one that has enough connections from the get-go. I could have done that. It's not like I chose the easy route. I had a long time of research, but I could have done more. I could have continued looking until I found one, but I didn't. And that affected a lot of other choices, because it seems like that motherboard is not like out of end of life yet, but you have a lot of expansion cards that are not produced anymore. I had a hard time finding network cards, I had a hard time finding a great controller, and a lot of stuff just became incredibly expensive because I wanted to stay in that Asus realm. Whereas if I would have gone with an ASRock, you have that ASRock rack, like their division for server motherboards. You have all sorts of different companies that create this kind of stuff, but I definitely made myself an easy way here, which ended up being extremely hard on myself for no particular reason. A day more of research and a lot of time would have been saved. However, there are also positive sides, like for example the IPMI thingy here from Asus works flawlessly. To be honest, it's basically a glorified fan controller for me. I'm not doing more than just fan controlling, let's be honest here. However, the whole remote control thing is a blessing. Being able to reconfigure BIOS from like far away or not using the server itself, like, not attaching anything to it, that's a freaking blessing. The thing that isn't a blessing though is installing an OS using solely IPMI. Installing TrueNAS took hours. Get a USB drive, plug it in, and then use the IPMI system. But don't try to fiddle your ISO through the H5 viewer. That you will waste so much time on that. But nonetheless, I mean, it's cool to be able to see like server stuff going on. It's basically a fan controller. I don't do anything else. Like sure, it's cool to see like the voltage on the 12-volt rail and the CPU temperature and all. Yeah, of course, that's really freaking cool. But other than the remote control and fan control, I won't do anything else using that thing. Because even shutting down, I will do over TrueNAS. So it's not like I am starting and stopping the server using this. But yeah, it's cool to have. It's basically cool to have. Other components would be, for example, the drives, which for now seem perfectly fine. The one mistake I did, but I didn't know about it until today when I did some more research. I should not have bought all my hard drives at the same place at the same time. Like apparently you want to have different batches and distribute your hard drives over multiple like production dates. And the reason for that is you don't want them to all fail at once. Apparently that is a thing. You want to buy them more like separated and then have one of each or one at a time break down in a couple of years. But I believe we are so many years in advance of that, so I'm not fearing it, but apparently that's something you should do. Not buy all the hard drives at once at one place. Now another smaller mistake that I made is TrueNAS scale. Now I love TrueNAS, I have been using TrueNAS now for a bunch of years and I really like it, but scale is different than core. And for now, I have not seen one single place where I had the benefit of taking scale over core. I used to have core, and switching to scale made a whole lot of things like more complicated. Maybe I was just too much used to scale and I found myself in multiple situations where I didn't know what was going on. For example, Plex, like I had to do a lot more steps, a lot more setting paths for Plex server to actually work, because otherwise it kind of behaved like a client, and it was all kinds of weird stuff. And apparently core is just easier with these things, and all of these applications seem to be written more for core than for scale. Another example would be there is a very interesting application called Open Speed Test for TrueNAS, sorry, where you can basically check your speed from the browser that you're using to your TrueNAS instance. And, ooh, the fans are ramping up by 5%. And I used that multiple times to see if the 10 gig connection takes on, but apparently it doesn't exist for scale. It's that simple. It's written for core, you can't find it on scale, so I couldn't use it, which just really sucked for me, because I know the application, I like to use it. Now, the issue I have with scale is not even remotely enough to make me reinstall it and switch over to core again. It just won't. Because I don't need to check the connection all the time. Once it's working, I'm fine, and that is going to be it. But if I would do it again, I would for sure stay on core. Maybe because I'm just more used to, but that's the thing. Oh yeah, my last mistake. This UPS. It was a very dumb purchase not to check if this doesn't have like a shutdown feature, because it doesn't. My UPS over here, which is powering the server right now, can just sustain it for a few more hours until everything shuts down, which is just stupid. I should have checked if I have that shutdown feature. Mistake on my part. So what would I have done differently? Other motherboard, definitely, which would prevent me from getting the RAID card, hopefully. A different UPS, and definitely not switched over to scale and stayed on TrueNAS core. The thing that I said in the beginning that I won't do is exchanging the fans. Yes, they are completely OP, but if you disable or you turn down that sensor alert, you can make them spin at 1000 RPM and they won't really be hearable from more than a meter away. So the fans are perfectly fine, I will keep them and I'm okay with that. However, there are also things that I did well that I would do again. Like for example, stay in a single universe of manufacturer. I bought everything from Asus, the RAID card, the network card, and all that kind of stuff, because I have the Asus motherboard, and that was a very wise choice. It's and the RAM I chose from the QVL list. Okay, the CPU was on there no matter what, but the RAID card, the network card, and the RAM, everything worked out of the box, and that was a blessing. I remember with my old server, I bought a network card from I don't even remember who. It doesn't work half the time. The handshake for the network standard doesn't really work. It always switches down to 1 gig. And it is a 10 gig card. And it says I'm trying to get a 10 gig connection, but it won't. Sometimes it works and then sometimes it doesn't, and it's all sorts of issues. In this case here, it just worked. The RAID card worked flawlessly, passed through all the hard drives to TrueNAS without making any problem. The network card worked immediately, recognized in BIOS, everything worked out of the box, and I think it's because I stayed in one big universe, the Asus verse of server hardware, and that was a very wise choice, and I would do it again, hands down. Now, as I said, not necessarily in like Asus world, because if I would have chosen a different motherboard, maybe I would have had a different manufacturer, and then I would have chosen a different network card, and so on and so forth. That's a possibility, but stay in like one compatibility list. And if you are in the server space, if the manufacturer says card A, B, C is, let's say, supported, stay in that list. Don't get anything, you will get into so much trouble. I was in trouble with the old server. In here, this wasn't on the list, and the Asus card was on the list, and it worked flawlessly. So that's really one thing I would absolutely do again. Just stay within the realm of what your manufacturer is telling you. Oh, my list is complete. So I did a little table of what this whole thing cost in the end. Now, thankfully, I don't have to pay everything. Like the case was sponsored, the CPU was sponsored, the power supply was sponsored, and I believe that's all. The whole rest I had to buy, but I checked all the prices right now and here, what I would pay if I would rebuild the server as it stands here. And for the SilverStone case, it actually costs right now 569 euros, hella expensive. The AMD EPIC 7763 boils down to 2,269 euros, that's expensive. The Asus motherboard boils down to 504. Then we have the 500 gigs of Samsung ECC memory, which were about 936 euros when I bought them. The Asus Spike 2, the RAID controller, was about 223 euros. The Asus network card was about 250. The UPS was 250 also, though given it was a wrong purchase, but that doesn't matter here. Then I had about 50 euros worth of cables and extensions and splitters. So we had the 4 cables going from the blades to the motherboard or to the RAID card, and we had all of the Molex splitters in the front. And in total that was about 50 euros. Now the most expensive part about all of this were the hard drives. We had 20 terabytes of spinning artifacts, boiling down to 400 terabytes total. Now, given we can only use like 265 terabytes, but you know, redundancy, speed gain, all of that stuff. But the hard drives were a total of 6,435 euros, which, yeah, that hurt. I had to pay that myself. However, this puts us at a total of 11,486 euros if I would rebuild this out of my own pocket right now. Now, if I would have chosen a different CPU and thus a different motherboard, and we could boil that price down to maybe 1,000 total, which would then mean that we could do this under 10K. But not a lot under, because half of the budget is already spent just on hard drives alone. So there is a bit of margin of error here, but this as it stands, 11,500 euros. More expensive than I thought. Holy damn. But what will I do now? Well, nothing. I can't move the server. Not because I don't want to, but because I am copying over the biggest chunk, and this will take more than a day. And I believe when we started this video, we were at like 41.5 terabytes, and now we are at 41. So you can see where this is heading. And this was a very stupid idea, because I am filming B-rolls here, and I need to film B-rolls of like 10 different fans, which I can't, because I can't move the server until this is finished. This wasn't my smartest move. But I believe this will then conclude our server series. Now, it was very interesting for me to do all of that for the first time. I have never played around in this type of hardware, and it is truly vastly different. It is not the same thing like a PC where you, or maybe it is after a few times, maybe it is, but let me phrase that differently. When you come from building PCs all day long, not everything in here is as intuitive as you might believe. Some things, standards, things you do are a bit different, but a bit of adaptation, and then I believe everybody who's built a PC can do this. He will just, run into a wall a few times, like we did with these amazing adapters here. But okay, I believe this was the summary of all of my server endeavor. But at this point, another huge thank you to AMD and SilverStone for sending over the CPU, the chassis, the power supply, all of that stuff, so we could do this. And I hope this will serve us well for the next few years, or until I fill up the whole thing and we need to buy an expansion for this. But for now, this is going to be it. If there is any question, if there are a number of questions, what I did, why I did, or how it turned out to work, write them in the comments. If there are enough questions, I may do another video, or I'll try to answer them in the Discord server. So if you want to join that, the link is down below. But okay, I believe I'm done. Finally, 11 episodes, like 7 too much. Thank you for coming along for this wild ride. It was wild for me. I hope you enjoyed watching me do all of this weird stuff, getting angry, buying stuff again, and then figuring out what I did wrong in the first place. But I hope you enjoyed all of that, and I also hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.